Hello, everybody. Welcome. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us today for our advocacy training. We're just going to give it a few more minutes for people to come in. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat while we wait. Okay, so we are going to get started. We have a great program for you all today. I'm going to start by introducing our wonderful co-chairs, Ivy Cook and Pamela Morgan.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I see some familiar or many familiar faces. So I don't think you are newbies at advocacy, but thank you for your diligence in joining us for another training. But I think that I'm jumping straight in. Sorry, I'm Ivy Cook, and I represent Soka Gakkai International at the United Nations. And I am with Pamela, co-chairing the committee. And I believe that what you're going to learn here today is something that's quite foundational and can be mostly applied across all UN processes. So yeah, I hope you get a lot out of it. I know I will, even though it's not the first time. So I will pass it on to Pamela. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ivy, and good day, everyone. And we're delighted to host this advocacy training. I want to bring to your attention the fact that NGO CSW is a very small organization. We only have one full-time employee, and we have 3 interns and one part-time employee. So I want to give special consideration to Rachel, our program coordinator, our interns, and to Chanitra for pulling this together. I also want to recognize Rosa Lazard, Rosemary Barbaret, and Fotini for their efforts to really spearhead our advocacy and research group and to be supportive. The last thing I want to do is give a special appreciation for our advocacy toolkit. I feel it's the best tool that I've seen for advocacy at the UN. And today is the launch. So 3 cheers for our advocacy toolkit. And I'll turn it back to Rachel.
Thanks, Pam. We're going to start out with a couple of polls just to get a sense of who's joining us and what experience you're bringing with you. So let me launch this first poll. How many times have you attended the UN CSW or the NGO CSW forum? Give it a couple more minutes, seconds for people to respond. Okay. So it looks like we've got a majority of first timers, which is great. We love to see that. 62% first time. So welcome. This should be very informative for you all. We're going to go to our next poll, which is how much experience do you have advocating with member states, locally, nationally, or globally? Okay, great. So you all have some experience. Some of you have a lot of experience, which is great. And for those of you who don't have experience, we're hoping to address some key points for engaging and advocating. So we're very happy to have you joining us today.
Okay, I'd like to go over today's agenda. We're going to start with different types of advocacy because many of you come from different places, and we want you to see how your advocacy can fit into your time here at the UN for CSW69. Then we're going to thematic issues. Next, we'll have advocating during the CSW process. And then we're going to go to my favorite part, the advocacy toolkit. My favorite part, other than the ARG recommendations that Rosa and Fotini will bring to you. And then we'll have a Q&A. So at this point, we will get started with our program.
Thank you so much, Pam. So we decided to move this up. So sorry for not reflecting that in the agenda, but we wanted to introduce the advocacy toolkit first because everything you're going to hear today is detailed in this toolkit and more. So if you want to have it with you on hand as you follow along, we're going to have time for Q&A at the end. So we ask that you just hold any questions for the end. And yeah, it can inform your experience today, and you can take it with you as you engage in your advocacy throughout CSW and beyond. So let's get started. Very basic. We're just going to get on the same page of what are we talking about when we talk about advocacy. We're talking about, influencing decisions within political, economic, or social institutions. So how can you make it more likely that your voice is heard and that important issues that matter to you and your community are taken into account as governments or political institutions are creating policy or recommendations around these issues. So the first thing we're going to look at is what kind of advocate will you be? There's many different ways to advocate. You can advocate digitally. There are so many tools at our disposal today to reach a broader audience, reach a global audience, or even just connect with people locally in your community through social media. You can have email newsletters to give updates. There's all sorts of tools that you can use. You can meet digitally, which has expanded access considerably. So there is a lot more on digital advocacy in our toolkit. The other strategy is civil society connections. So finding other organizations that have similar advocacy priorities to yours or whose advocacy priorities complement yours. And in the context of CSW and especially the NGO CSW forum, which is a space specifically by and for NGOs and civil society, you can engage by attending parallel events virtually and in person. It's a great way to meet other people who have similar interests and advocacy goals. Another way you can engage, and this is specific to the UN or the NGO CSW forum, is our conversation circles, which have been underway for the last 2 weeks. And we have our last set of 2 conversation circles coming up on Monday, and we'll be sure to share that link in the chat shortly. But really what the conversation circles are getting at is meeting with other people and just discussing strategies and goals and priorities. So this can be done within conversation circles through NGO CSW or on your own. And one of the best ways we think that you can do that through our virtual portal is by posting in the community section, scheduling a meetup, finding other people and getting together and gathering and discussing. It's a great way to get the ideas flowing and get some strategies in place. Another way to advocate is through specific policy recommendations and engaging in specific policy processes. And typically at the CSW, this happens through engaging with the outcome document process. This year, that process looks a little different because we're in a review year. So if you want to know more about that process and what it looks like this year, again, look in our advocacy toolkit because we do talk about that. But yeah, engaging in policy process is another way of advocating. And another aspect of advocacy is the level of engagement. So are you looking to advocate locally, nationally, globally, figuring out where you want to put your energy and where is the best place for you to put your energy? And that brings us to our next topic, which is the local to global connection. So in order to kind of help figure out at what level do you want to be engaging? And of course, we're all here to talk about the UN CSW and the forum. So we're talking about, a global intergovernmental process, but what's really important and what's going to make these priorities happen is the local and localization of those goals. So a good way to do this is to identify your goals. What do you want to advocate for, and having a specific advocacy goal? Identifying your partners who can help you get there, who can be your network in your community to really drive those issues home and place the kind of pressure that you need on your governments, on your representatives to implement those commitments. Identify your targets, governments, representatives, political figures. Who do you want to target your message to? And then once you have all of these pieces in place, you can develop your strategy of how you're going to bring it all into fruition. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful advocacy and research group co-chairs. And we have another co-chair, Rosemary Barbre. I'm not sure if she's here today, but Fotini and Rosa are going to walk us through some advocacy points and also the advocacy and research group recommendations for this year. So take it away, Fotini and Rosa.
Great, thank you so much, Rachel. Good to see everyone on this call today. My name is Fotini Papayotti. I'm the Deputy Director for Policy and Advocacy at the International Center for Research on Women and a member of the Executive Committee of NGO CSW. So looking at advocacy with relation to CSW69, it's important to remember that all of the issues under discussion are grounded into existing normative frameworks, global frameworks that have been accepted and ratified by almost all of the member states in the United Nations system. Some of those frameworks we have outlined on this slide, and again, all of this information and more will be included in the advocacy toolkit. Do not feel like you need to retain all that information now. This is more for your introduction to where all of the issues are coming from. So starting with the human rights framework, the UN Charter from 1945 and the Universal Declaration on Human Rights from 1948. These are two key foundational documents and frameworks that outline the fundamental human rights, including the right equality and principles like equality, non-discrimination, civil, economic, political rights that are to be universally protected by all signatories and member states of the United Nations system. Then about 30 years later, we have the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, more typically known as CEDAW, which is also known as a global Bill of Rights for women and girls. This is an international treaty that aims to end discrimination against women and girls in all of its forms. It was launched in 1979 and enjoys almost universal ratification. There's fewer than a handful of member states that have not fully ratified CEDAW. The treaty itself is complemented by the Committee on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which is a body of independent experts who monitor implementation of the convention around the world in different member states and provide tailored recommendations to eliminate discrimination in specific countries that invite them to review the process. and also issues more general general recommendations that member states are then, and signatories to the optional protocol of the convention, are obliged to integrate into their own national legislation. More recently, there was the general recommendation on the right to equal participation in public and private life that CEDAW experts released. And then we have the Beijing Platform for Action. This is a year of commemorating this foundational document for gender equality that looked at issues that affect women's rights across 12 critical areas, and was issued on the margins of the World Conference on Women in 1995 in Beijing. The vision of that document remains still relevant, and very rightly so. We have seen some progress across those 12 critical areas, but also significant gaps toward the full achievement of gender equality and the protection and promotion of the rights of women and girls in all their diversity. And this year, CSW will be reviewing progress toward the goals outlined in this foundational document, because it is the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Platform for Action. There's also the Sustainable Development Goals, also known as the Agenda 2030. This is a group of 17 goals with specific sub-targets and objectives that member states have agreed that they would promote in their national and international policies. Gender equality is supposed to be cross-cutting in this agenda. However, there's also a specific target, SDG 5, drawn from the Beijing Platform for Action again, that looks at specific actions that member states need to advance to progress toward achieving gender equality. Every year at the High Level Political Forum, or HLPF, groups of these SDGs are reviewed by member states to assess progress, and the UN, through the Secretary General and the Department of Economic and Social DESA, there's an A there that escapes me right now, apologies for that, issue reports on how we're progressing against all of these goals. And, you know, spoiler alert, not very well. We have also added the financing for development framework, which self-explanatory, talks about financing to enable the achievement of the SDGs, what kind of financial resources member states need to mobilize to promote sustainable development, including gender equality in there, and reforms that are needed to the global governance and financial architecture to improve these financing sources and accelerate progress towards sustainable development. More recently, in the last 10 years, we've seen the rise of feminist foreign policies. You may have heard the term. It was first adopted by Sweden back in 2014 and was based on the 3 R's framework for rights, representation, and resources. This is a framing that states use, some states, like a little less than 20 currently, that they use to frame their action at the national, international, and multilateral level to promote the rights of women and girls, to ensure that this work is adequately resourced, and also to improve women's representation in public life, in leadership and decision-making. So this also comes from some of these pre-existing frameworks that promote people, peace, and planet. So drawing from these global normative frameworks, what does that all mean for your engagement in the process, particularly as we think about the language recommendations and the outcome document? I think for advocates, the first step involves a little bit of background research relevant to each year's priority theme for CSW, which is the theme that member states will be discussing in their negotiations and which will structure the outcome document of the negotiations. So identifying how your work relates to this priority theme and what are the issues that you would want to see highlighted in this document, whether it's normative objectives that you have or specific policy recommendations that you would like to see integrated into the outcome document. So it's important to do that background research, identify where your issues fit into the areas, the priority conversations, and then develop that recommended language and issues that you want to see included in the outcome document. The next step is then identifying which member states share your positions to the extent that you think that is relevant, and share your proposals with them. There are public statements that member states deliver across multiple processes in the United Nations that are relevant to these conversations. So doing that little bit of research, and of course relying on your bilateral relationships to see where there is alignment in goals and where there's an opening for you to engage with policymakers and bring forward your recommendations. At the same time, you can also share your recommendations on social media. You can share them with other organizations and partners, ideally with coalitions of partners, so that you can garner support for your recommendations and your work. This will then, especially if you're working within a broader coalition, can strengthen your position as you advocate and engage with member states. The bulk of the work, I feel, is primarily around continuing to build those bilateral relationships with member states. Apologies, I think I was muted for a second there, but meeting with the member states is the bulk of the work. Engaging with them, continuing to provide them with concrete language recommendations and inputs, and building a relationship of trust, which I feel, particularly in our current context, can be very challenging, is an important element of the advocacy process for the document. So typically, this outcome document will include language on gender equality and the rights of women and girls. And we know from engaging with member states that these language recommendations and negotiations can become often contentious on a range of issues. We have outlined some here on the slide, and we know that particularly in our current context, we're seeing member states come in and dispute any efforts to promote what they identify as gender ideology or diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's attacks on many different levels of language. I think what's important to remember in our current context is that language reflects a political position from member states, and it's important then for our advocacy to understand what is behind the language preferences that member states put forward in their negotiations. Understanding the political context and the nuance and the trade-offs that are sometimes involved in these negotiations. For example, when some member states express themselves in favor of women and development, that may sound as a positive, especially for someone who is newer to these processes. It then takes a bit of analysis to understand whether that is posited as in opposition to then looking beyond just development to human rights language, for example. So understanding that political nuance and the potential trade-offs in the language negotiations can help sharpen your message, recommendations, and advocacy with member states as you go along. And with that, I will pass it back to Rachel for another poll of ours. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Fatini. We just want to gauge, what does your advocacy currently look like? Are you engaging with negotiation processes this year? And just kind of see where you all are at with this. So you should see the poll. I'm gonna give it like 5 more seconds. Okay. So it looks like, almost half and half, not at all, and somewhat, and some not sure. I think this year the negotiation process does look different. So that definitely, comes into play here for sure. I will go to our next poll. Will you try to meet with your government delegation during CSW? Okay, great. Half of you say yes. I'm not sure if everyone is aware, but you can find information on your government's permanent mission at the UN on Blue Book. That is a good way to find contact information, email addresses, things like that. So the next, I will pass it over to Rosa, who's going to go over some of our advocacy and research groups' priorities for this year.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to be talking about specific work that our advocacy and research group has developed, and this is the Advocacy and Research Group, or ARG, as it's known by its acronym, has done as part of the NGO CSW. Our work is very much focused on recommendations for every CSW. So first of all, with the guidance of our NGO CSW Executive Committee, we develop an advocacy plan, which includes developing these recommendations based on the priority of the CSW at that time. We create and develop these recommendations and create briefs, which are basically 1-pagers, maybe 2 pages, to ensure that we have very specific and bite-sized language for these recommendations. They're primarily for use with member states advocacy, but of course, we have them available for all of you, our constituency, to use with your governments during the CSW. This year, because we have the review of the Beijing +30 for the CSW, which covers 12 critical areas of concern in the Beijing Political Declaration and other issues, we decided to focus on another process that was happening parallel, which is the revitalization of the CSW. And I will be covering that, but at this point, I really would like to acknowledge the incredible work of our ARG, which has been meeting for months. This work is being done by volunteers. So let me just do a quick shout out to our members. Small but mighty group. It includes our co-chairs, Pamela and Ivy, and from Latin America, Mabel Bianco, from Europe, Berthe Vosniven, from the MENA region, Shireen Judhi, From the North American region, Shaila Rao-Mistry, some of our experts, Joanne Sandler, Dubravka Simonovic, and also from the North America region, Linda Woodtog. I hope you're here. We'll shout out in the chat. And also to my co-chairs, my fellow co-chairs, Rosemary Barbaret and Fotini, whom you met, and our wonderful interns, Mads and Beck, and Rachel, our coordinator. So to focus on this CSW revitalization issue, it's been developing over time, building up to past discussion points, mainly after the CSWs and discussing how effective is the CSW. For those 62% that this is a new process for you, the CSW. In past years, there is the 2 weeks of the CSW, it has sort of bogged down in language battles, as you heard from Fontany, in some division in gender equality pushback. And so people have come out of that asking, how effective is it? How can we revitalize the CSW? This is a very important process. It was it culminated into a resolution at the General Assembly level, driven by Global South countries. And it was included in last year's Summit of the Future. Some of you may have been involved in that process. CSW revitalization was included in Action 43 of the outcome of the Summit of the Future, which is the Pact for the Future. And let me just read this part of that action. The governments, through an inclusive intergovernmental process with the participation of all member states, plan to explore options in the context of the Beijing +30 to revitalize the Commission on the Status of Women, to promote the full and effective implementation of the Beijing Platform for Action, to achieve gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls, and promote and protect their human rights, and to ensure that the Commission is fit for purpose. So this mandate has come out of the General Assembly, which is a 193 country body, and has been mandated to the president of ECOSOC. And for us, that's good, because the ECOSOC, the Economic and Social Council, includes the process of NGO accreditation. So we are very much in this process to be partners with member states in the CSW revitalization. And the NGO CSW, we have held 2 roundtables with member states on CSW revitalization, and we have developed these recommendations, which I will review for you. The process for these recommendations included a global survey, which the NGO CSW conducted with you, our constituency, with over 700 organizational responses. We took that data and followed up with input from our expert partners, from feminist, women's, youth organizations and networks, and other marginalized communities, to develop these 9 recommendations. We divided them first into 2 parts. One was process and stakeholder engagement, and then into content. So the first 3 are primarily on process and stakeholder engagement. And we will have the link for these NGO CSW ARG recommendations, I'm sure, in the chat, if it's not already there. I can't monitor that at the moment, but I will when I'm done. These have a beginning chapeau, introductory paragraphs. And in that, we want to underscore that the CSW remains a critical and effective space for the global advancement of gender equality. And we stress that as civil society organizations, we have long been documenting the breadth and the depth of the Commission's outcomes and see that they have not always matched with the political will to implement these cross-cutting, measurable, and time-bound commitments. And so for this reason, we really want to ensure that we are promoting progress and ensuring that we're not regressing with key gender equality goals and targets. So for the first part on process and stakeholder engagement, I'll give you the headlines, and we have more information in our brief, as well as we'll be having resource citations to each one. But they've been well developed and researched. The first recommendation is to require effective accountability from all CSW stakeholders, meaning member states, UN Women, civil society, and we're highlighting the critical gaps between the Commission's ambitious recommendations and the political will to implement them, and to have them addressed with clear, measurable, time-bound commitments and removing obstacles to gender equality. 2, we highlighted promoting local, national, regional, and global collaboration through greater inclusion and linkage with UN gender mechanisms, such as CEDAW, as Fotini mentioned, the Women, Youth, Peace, and Security area, and also with UN special rapporteurs. That is a process that we also want to link with previous CSW agreed conclusions, because sometimes we notice that these agreements are there and there's no follow-up or implementation. And 3, we highlight the critical role, leadership role that civil society organizations play and will continue to play in advancing gender equality for the rights of women and girls in all their diversity. So next slide. On content, overwhelmingly, our constituency has recommended that violence against women and gender-based violence be mandated as a standing item for review at every CSW. And we want to stress the action. In one of the roundtables, member states are saying, well, we're all for violence against women and ensuring, we combat gender-based violence, but we are stressing the action and the implementation components of this recommendation. 5, we want a mandate for women in power and decision-making as a standing item for review in the CSWs. That's very plain and simple, and put forth with more detail in our brief. 6, we recommend mandating women and armed conflict as a CSW priority theme. We want to ensure that we are looking at that issue, especially during these times of war happening around the world. 7, we call for recognizing emerging issues such as artificial intelligence, science, technology, engineering, art, and math, STEAM, cybersecurity, ethics, and safety, all of which are impacting our decision-making and existence. 8, we call for addressing the intersectional impact of the climate crisis and disaster, specifically with regards to food, water, energy, air insecurity, health, economic, environmental impacts, trafficking, and population displacement. These are issues that have been surfacing and we've seen very much as emerging issues. So we want to ensure that the CSW is up to date and fit for purpose with regard to these issues. And 9, we call for prioritizing the regular review of women and girls' poverty, addressing and reversing economic and financial gender biases, and mandating inclusion in leadership and financing. So these are the 9. We have sent these recommendations to all members, 193 member states. We've submitted it to UN Women as a Beijing Plus 30 parallel report. And we have them on our website. We're advocating with the co-chairs of the CSW revitalization from Ireland and Botswana. And the process going forward is that, I think that's the next slide, Rachel, perhaps, is that 1, we will be having an event during the second week of the CSW NGO Forum on CSW revitalization. I hope if you're there in person, and we are going to try to do it hybrid for those who are not staying for the second week. It's on Tuesday, March 18th, 12:30 in the main level of the church center, the chapel. And we are also promoting these recommendations as sign-on. So if you are able to grab your phone and point to that QR and sign on, if not, we'll put it in the chat. If your recommendation endorses these, or you were part of the global survey and you want to ensure you sign on, please do. We're going to be promoting it during the CSW. In terms of the official process, we heard yesterday at the first informal meeting held by the co-chairs, the co-facilitators, I should say, Botswana and Ireland, that they will be taking inputs into this process from civil society, from all stakeholders. They did not give an end date, and they yesterday did not give an email, but we will ensure that we give you that information so that you could send your inputs. And maybe you want to say, and we endorse the NGO CSW ARG recommendations, and put a link and send that off. That would be great too. But that process will be open for the next couple of weeks, is what we understood. Then they will be taking a little break and resuming consultations in April. And they are planning to end in the beginning of July for the high-level political forum. That is the calendar as we heard. Any updates we will certainly provide you with in our regular communications. If you haven't signed up for our listserv, please do. I'm sure you'll see that in the chat as well. And so I think at this point, we are going to move to another poll. So thank you so much. Any questions I'll look at in the chat and we'll try to get to them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rosa. We are going to do the poll at the end, but first we're going to do Q&A. So if anybody has questions for the co-chairs of ARG, please raise your hands or put the questions in the chat.
Rachel, it might be good to stop screen sharing so we can see people. Thank you. Yeah, I see a question from Beverly. My question is regarding a Hoover app. How can we join the CSW forum? So Beverly, do you want to elaborate on what you're referring to?
Sure,
Okay.
sure. Good morning, everybody. Yes, I've already downloaded the app, but it's asking for a code. Where are we supposed to obtain this code? Thank you.
So the process for registering and accessing the virtual portal, it's a two-step process. First, you must register for the forum, which is different than creating your account and signing in. So if you try to set up your account and then go to sign in without registering first, it will ask you for an invite code. So there is no invite code, is the short answer. You must register first, and then you will be able to access the platform. And I'm going to put the registration link in the chat.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. So during the registration process, at the end of the form, so it's going to ask you a bunch of questions about yourself and your organization, if you're, how you're going to be participating in the forum. And at the very end, it will prompt you to enter a email and password. So that is sort of the, 2-in-1. You'll create your account during registration. And then once you go to actually sign into the portal, you'll use that email and password to sign in and access. So I hope that clarifies. I know it's a little confusing and some people were kind of doing them out of order and running into issues. So we want to make sure everybody knows how to access and do that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
There's a question in the chat about side events and when they are usually announced. And it's interesting because this year they're a little late. So we're hoping generally it's about 2 weeks ahead of CSW. So it should be any date now. But because they are handled by UN Women, we are not privy to the details. Will there be anything about CSW revitalization in the CSW69 political declaration? Great question, Susan. And that's a member state question. Member states are in control of the political declaration, and I haven't seen anything in the zero draft nor Rev 1, but I don't know.
Pamela, the Esme asked a question. Do we register events by adding the events into our agenda? Are there further steps to register for a parallel event? And I know it's a little different this year with the QR code. And so I just was wondering the same thing, if we should tell people that there's more steps to that.
Rachel?
Yeah, so for the registration, our registration is just for the forum as an event as a whole. So there may be, a second step of registration if the event organizer has set one up. So if the event organizer has created, some sort of an RSVP form, or especially if it's a virtual event and there's a Zoom registration link, kind of thing. So that would be the individual event registration. It wouldn't be set up by us. It would be set up by the particular organizer for that event. Once you register for the forum, you'll receive a confirmation email that says something like your tickets to the CSW69 Beijing +30 forum. It's not purchased, it's free. It's called tickets in Hoover. So you'll receive an email that says that, and in that email, if you scroll down, you'll see your QR code there, and there's an option to add it to your Apple Wallet or your Google Wallet. We recommend, doing that if you have one of those devices, screenshotting it, printing it out, having it readily available for your access when you come into the forum. So we will be having volunteers stationed at each room for in-person events, and they will be checking for QR codes. So that's kind of how that's going to work. And if you're an ECOSOC accredited organization and you have a badge, your badge can also serve as, you know, your entry. We're just trying to make sure that everybody who's attending has either registered for the forum or is definitely here for CSW, just due to heightened safety and security concerns recently. So yeah, that is the QR code. It will be in an email confirmation after you register.
And Emily McPherson has a question. Emily, would you want to turn on your mic and ask?
I can do, thank you. Good evening from Norway. I just wondered, so obviously I'm here for this today. I came a bit late and I'd signed up for a previous webinar about the forum training. And it's my first time going to this. I just wondered, will there be any recordings? Because I saw a recording. Will that be made available afterwards? Thank you so much.
Emily, do you mean the recording of this event or of other forum events?
Of this this session here, and the training session that was the other day about the forum.
Yeah, so all of our training sessions are recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel. We're also planning to send out a newsletter on Monday with more updates and details about the forum, and we will include links to all of our trainings that have happened in that as well. But if you want to look for them now, some of them have been already added to our YouTube channel.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Rachel, I just wanted to come in and reply to that question about any member state work on CSW revitalization during the CSW. There will be an event on the 13th, Thursday the 13th. It's a high-level interactive dialogue on accelerating the implementation of the Beijing Platform for Action and the role of the CSW. That is on CSW revitalization. It's an official meeting, so those with the ECOSOC badge can enter into that meeting. I'm going to put the calendar of the official meetings here in the chat, and then there is a link with a concept note of that high-level interactive dialogue. So I will put it in the chat as well.
Okay, it looks like Aida Mur-Ilsam has a question.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much for all the insights. It was really interesting. I think one question, or it's two questions maybe that I have is in the current context of backlash on human and women's rights, how much can we expect to influence the CSW this year? I have to check ahead of the question. Yeah, it was basically that. It's the how much can we expect to influence the process? Also because this year it's really special as well, and we had those language battles in the previous years, and I think yeah, people ask themselves if the CSW, the way we know it, still exists. But I also could sense some hope during the intervention that CSW still records process. So I just wanted to know about our power to influence. Thank you.
I mean, can I jump in on this one?
Absolutely.
And there were some other questions related to this as well. Aida, I think you and others were asking about this influencing member states and how open are they to civil society engagement generally. And, you know, there are going to be member states who are very friendly, who are very supportive of civil society engagement and are going to speak about inclusion and The co-facilitators of the CSW revitalization, for example, have stated multiple times that they want a transparent and inclusive process. However, those in the room yesterday, you can hear the recording that some of them are really wanting it to be a closed intergovernmental process. So you can kind of map here and there which member states are going to be more receptive to you. But also the other thing to that I've learned over the years based in New York is that these are human relationships too. So I think that you have to also get to know delegations and kind of find your inroads as well. Yeah, Fotini has a thumbs up. And this also means that finding like-minded, those who are also going to advocate with the same mind, right? I mean, for you to have a collective voice rather than a singular one, that's definitely going to be more powerful. So to say 1 year over the next, it's going to be less or more difficult. I think it's hard to say, right? Because even in the world today, we can't say it's one or the other. This is just maybe I'm being philosophical here. And so I think that there's always an opportunity, and we have to also use our wisdom and creativity and how to navigate this space, but find out who your delegations are. We don't get to know. I know somebody asked about NGO delegates. We ask this question all the time. We don't always get the information. UN Women sometimes has it, but not always, it seems. So it's just really through our networks that we learn about the delegations with NGO representatives. So I hope that kind of touches on what was shared. Well, thank you for your Purple Heart.
Yeah, I
Okay.
want to jump in also, because the beauty of today is that we've just had an advocacy training, and we have a little toolkit that we can use. And it's important for you to remember at the beginning of the session, we spoke about local, national, regional, and then global impact. So your first step is to start locally. Look at your city, look at your state, look at your country, see who you can contact, and then move to your region. What region of the world are you in, and who are the policymakers that you or your mother's brother or someone that might be able to interact with, and use your networks. But Ivy was absolutely correct, but she made me start really reflecting on the beauty of this important advocacy training. So I don't know if Beverly's hand is an old hand, but I see Shayla's hand.
No, mine is a new hand. I'm so sorry. I had a follow-up question because I'll be there the first week of CSW. And I noticed there was a parallel event that required tickets that is now sold out. Will there be any possibility for other people to be able to join that parallel event, even though it is sold out, or is it completely full? Thank you.
Nesrin shaking her head no, because she knows. No, it was not. It's not a parallel. A parallel event was our reception, and the reception is sold out, and we have a waiting list. So we're really sorry. It sold out more quickly than we anticipated, and next time we'll have to rent probably Yankee Stadium or something to have a venue large enough.
Will there be any way to put my name on the waiting list, or is the waiting list full as well?
The waiting list is full as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. Good to know.
Thank you, Shayla.
Yes, two questions. The first is, do we know the date of our town hall meeting with the Secretary General? I know he has one every year. Do we have a date for that? And then do we have any idea how to contact Or do we know who the US government delegates are going to be? Has that been announced for the US? So is there a way we can learn of that so that then we can reach out? And also third question, will there be a US briefing? That's just for the US. I'm just curious.
But that's definitely the mission. I mean, the mission determines that, and how open or closed that is also, as far as their invitees. I'm not, I personally I'm not sure.
Yeah,
But they usually do have a briefing, but
Yeah.
who knows how they're gonna handle it. Rosa maybe she has more intel.
Well, I just put in the chat that they usually do have one, but because of the change of administration, we're just not sure.
You're not sure.
There is someone that we met from the US mission that we can ask. But I think if, going on the website first to see if there's any link there, or going through, some local channels with your any contacts at the US mission that you may have had, that those people might not have changed. We don't have an ambassador yet. No one's been confirmed, so we're not sure about what's going to happen.
And the town hall meeting has not been decided.
Yeah, has not, and the UN Women doesn't know either. I mean, they're working with the office, the SG's office on that.
Okay. Are there any other questions? I don't see any other hands.
If I might jump in, I see some questions in the chat around UN badges and special event tickets. Very briefly, for your organization to obtain a UN badge, you need to have accreditation with the ECOSOC. That's a whole process there. And then having that accreditation, there's a specific website where you add your organization's information. They will request some documentation around the organization's leadership. And then you will be able to submit the request for the annual or temporary passes. Yes, Rachel has dropped some links in the chat on that. It's a longer process, but if you don't have the UN Grounds Pass, you need to be keeping an eye out on the official side events schedule. You register for those, and then you indicate that you do not have a UN Grounds Pass, and they will issue what they call an SET, special events ticket, that you will need to pick up before you go into the actual events to be able to get into the UN grounds, the UN building. All other events that are outside of the UN building do not need a UN grounds pass or a special ticket, but the organizers will let you know if there's a specific registration or accreditation process to join those.
Okay, Susan.
Hi, Pam. I have a question. It's not quite about CSW, but it's about Afghanistan. I saw a note in the chat, someone asking about Afghanistan. I wonder if there is anyone on the call today that has ideas about how we can advocate for the women of Afghanistan who are facing such challenges.
Corey, was that in response to Susan, or no? You have a question in this one? Is there anyone that can respond to Susan's question? If there's anyone among us that's doing something that you'd like to share with the group, please identify yourself.
Yeah, after CSW, we're going to start a podcast, and the first person that we're going to have on the podcast is going to be Nahid Shalimani, who is from Afghanistan, and she's done work.
Playing from off the scene.
In fact, she's still doing work in Afghanistan on women's health, and we're going to talk about sexual and reproductive health. So that isn't directly involved, Susan, with activism from women here, but it's a first step for us in starting a conversation.
I also saw that Nasreen had her hand up in response to this question.
Hi, I was just typing, but let me give you a little information. We are holding parallel events on the 17th, which is going to be online. And one of the speakers is from Afghanistan. She was ambassador to Norway till 3 years ago. She's a journalist, well-known woman, feminist, activist, amazing person, and we become very good friends. So I got her grand pass, and she's coming with me to US, and you can meet her and you can ask any question you prefer, or I can put her email down here if you want to contact, whatever you suggest, Pamela. Shall I share her email address?
Please,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, with pleasure.
Yes, Beth. Thank you, Nasreen.
So another option for engagement from afar, supporting Afghan girls, there is a wonderful school called School of Leadership Afghanistan, SOLA. I'll put the link into the chat. They operate now out of Rwanda. They were able to get all the girls and the teachers involved with the school on literally the last two planes out of Kabul as it was collapsing in 2022. It's an amazing high school. I support it from afar. One of my friends is teaching math there right now. They need people to mentor the girls, to help them with their English. It's an absolutely fabulous opportunity to educate the next generations of young Afghan women. So I would urge you to support it with your time and money. And once again, I'll put the link into the chat. School of Leadership Afghanistan. Thank you.
Oh, Beth, you were going to put it in the chat too. I think you're typing. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Corey.
First off, thank you so much for this forum. I really appreciate this. This is my first time attending, and I just had a generic question regarding networking and getting to engage with other NGOs. Is there any specific tips you can give on that, perhaps before you go to the actual event?
Well, the Whova platform, I would think, is one really good way to message people directly. I've had colleagues already say, oh, somebody contacted me and they wanted me for coffee. And, so yeah, I think that's a good way to connect. And of course, once you're here, it's quite easy. I mean, there's quite a lot of us walking around. So I hope that's helpful. So that's why it's important to register on the NGO forum platform for that reason.
Yeah, and not to be shy. When you see people who seem to have your same point of view, approach them. Approach speakers who have points of view that you really relate to, because deep down, we're all just human. We're all the same. And people like to be acknowledged as they want to hear that they touched you. So, yeah, don't be shy. Just be yourself, give that smile. And yeah, it's important. I saw a couple of other hands arose.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello. Mine is to ask, how will someone access the UN badge? Then to understand more about your offices so that when we are here in Kenya, we can visit them and learn more about CSW. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that if you go to our website, you'll learn a lot about NGO CSW. Also go to UN Women's website so you can learn about UN Women, which is the secretariat for CSW. And when you come to the Church Center network, and I advise everyone before you come to read the advocacy toolkit because we have such wonderful tips for networking, for meeting people, for your activism work. So I think that that's a great way for you to prepare to come. And then use the Hoover, as Ivy said, use the Hoover app. And I'm like Ivy, I've gotten so many notes from people who are coming, who want to meet for coffee, who want to have short talks. But the thing is not to be shy, to really reach out and touch people. Ivy, Rachel, Rosa, do you see any other questions in the chat? Oh, if we organize a side event, who from NGO CSW can you invite? Oh, and Ivy responded.
Shannon had her hand raised and then it disappeared. So maybe she.
I was just gonna hop on the bandwagon about don't be shy because I look at specifically for Zonta International, we have several parallel events happening, both virtual and in person. And at all of these events, there's usually many Zonta members in attendance. And so just striking up a conversation with any one of those. And when you look at Hoover to see if Zonta, maybe if you missed one, has another event later, and any other organization might have multiple events, it's easy to talk to people to see where they're going next.
Thanks, Shannon. Teresia?
Hello, everyone. My name is Teresia. So I'm sorry if I'll be repeating this question, but I just wanted to understand how this works. I'm interested to attend the CSW69 sessions at the UN. So I was asking if I have the badge already, do I need to register?
No. If you have a grounds pass, do you have a grounds pass for New
Yes,
York?
I do. Yes.
No, we were told that we did not have to register on Indigo.
Okay, so I will be able to access the in-person meetings.
I believe so.
Okay, thank you so much.
I think I saw this question in the chat as well. If you have a grounds pass, you can use that in lieu of a QR code. However, if you do want to access the virtual portal and see the full agenda of parallel events, you will need to register.
Are there any other questions?
Just to ask Teresa if she has already obtained her UN grounds pass, because if not, you will have to go through the process of obtaining the grounds pass in the same place where people who've registered for the CSW to obtain their temporary pass for the CSW. And that can be a long wait. They usually have registration open the Friday before and the weekend. And that's probably the best time to go before the Monday morning rush.
And for those people who have had their grounds pass approved from NGO. You should have received an email today that has the directions for obtaining your grounds pass. And all of the information is right in that email. And we'll be putting it in our newsletter that's going out next week. And Ivy just put in the chat, don't wait till Monday. And I agree. You know, if you get there on Friday, get your grounds pass immediately, because the lines last year were down the street. It can be really daunting.
I think I saw a question if the International Women's Day convening in the UN is invitation only, or if that's open for registration.
Usually, if you have a grounds pass, an annual grounds pass, you can go in for the UN Women meeting, the commemoration of is that what, Rachel, was the question about International Women's Day? So I think is it Friday this year, the 8th, or
It's the
Friday?
7th.
The 7th.
Oh, Friday the 7th, but they'll probably hold it then because they wouldn't meet on the weekend. But that's usually open, and they will have registration. Potentially then you can get in if you register through UN Women. Without the pass, they would escort you in, I believe. But that would have to come through UN Women. They would notify people. We'll share it as soon as we get that information. We don't have it ourselves yet.
Right. The only thing I know is that I got a note maybe 6 weeks ago, and I had to apply for a ticket for the commemoration of International Women's Day. And so I have a ticket that I got, but I don't have any other information. So it's best to check on UN Women's website, and because I really only know that I got a note, and then I applied for a ticket.